Thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. Good night. No, that would be way
And
too
good
easy.
luck.
And good luck, yes. Same to you, fella. I'm Robert McBride of All Classical Portland. This is the music director of the Oregon Symphony, Carlos Kalmar.
Good evening, everybody.
With an all-American program tonight, the ABCs of 20th century American classical music, Antheil, Bernstein, and Copland. Antheil?
I want to say, you're making this up. Come on.
Who he?
Who he?
George Antheil. Now, the bad news for Carlos is you're not going to be able to name your autobiography The Bad Boy of Music.
Because he
Because
already
Antheil
did.
already did.
Yeah, I already thought about, what can I say? The evil person in music, my auto.
He was, according to Aaron Copland, a genius, Mr. Antheil, who never lived up to his potential.
Probably very true.
Yeah.
Probably what happened to George Antheil was that he was so immensely talented, and then in his very creative years, the only thing that he saw is going after a certain type of modernism that included actually very interesting tools in terms of composition, but it is of no use for. I mean, he was completely in love with how society developed and new machines and this mechanics and this kind of stuff. But he did not, by a very long shot, of course, because he lived earlier, go in the direction of John Cage. I mean, that is another one who is very interesting, of whom we cannot play music because, I mean, I don't have a vacuum cleaner on stage. Never mind. I could bring one. I mean, that's very interesting music.
So Malcolm Arnold did that too.
Well, yeah, but that's
grand overture.
I know that overture is really not a good overture. Despite the vacuum cleaners, I thought about it.
I bet it was Herbert Hoover's favorite.
Bad. Okay, George Antheil wrote quite a certain amount of music. You know, the interesting part of George Antheil is how I first came across a piece by his. And there was a German orchestra guesting in Vienna, and I was there, and the music director of that orchestra, it was Frankfurt Radio, was Hugh Wolf. Hugh Wolf, American conductor, really a good conductor. Really, he knows his thing. And he brought pieces by Antheil, not many, short pieces. And I listened, and I thought, wow, that's actually very interesting, approachable music. Everything that he writes is a little bit too long. But I thought, fine, this is actually a composer who just went on. Even when he writes a piece that is 10 minutes, it should be cut and be only 7. But I thought this is normal music. Completely wrong. I was so far from anything that is true by George Antheil, because first of all, his music is not too long. And his music, because of this machinery, whatever he wants to use, is way more wacky than whatever you can imagine. And so he wrote, his most famous piece that he wrote is the Ballet Mécanique. And I always say this, please, if you ever see in a program, anywhere you travel, Ballet Mécanique, please leave everything that you are doing and go. Because it's probably the only time you can hear it. Because to put that together, it's incredible. It's many prepared pianos to playing together with an ensemble of many percussion instruments and a couple of other tools like sirens and stuff like that. So what happens in this piece is prepared pianos does not mean that the pianos are prepared and there is a pianist playing. No, the pianos play by themselves. They just, you know these machines where the piano just plays? Somebody presses a button, go. And many of them, and the harmonies are completely crazy. And I always was mesmerized. I saw it once in Boston, how this magnificent conductor actually manages to keep that together. Because, trust me, I have done maybe 2 or 3 pieces where I have to follow a computer that is playing in the background. It's a nightmare. Trust me, it is and this guy follows 8 different pianos, all of like, well, that's ballet mechanic. Now, he wrote a jazz symphony for actually kind of a jazz ensemble in 1925. And the piece is a little bit all over the map. It's barely, at that time the piece was maybe 11 minutes long, and it's a little bit of this, and then a little bit of that, and then comes this, and you never know what comes next, and there are no transitions. So it's like, it works like in the movies, cut, next thing, and really very fast, everything. Now, this piece, the Jazz Symphony, was presented in the same concert, the first time, the premiere was in the same concert as this Ballet Mécanique. And the Jazz Symphony was first, and everybody was like, great piece, wonderful, new, and la 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 la. And then they played the Ballet Mécanique, a riot. And the piece, so Jazz Symphony was forgotten. It just disappeared pretty much. Until in the 50s, George Antheil revisited his own piece and wrote a version for normal big orchestra, shorter, not exactly as crazy, but there is stuff in there. And in regards to jazz itself, yes, it has some jazz elements, but you also will recognize Mr. Stravinsky in it, peeking over Mr. Antheil's shoulder. And it's actually funny music. Probably I would say it's more crazy than funny. But it's funny, it is. It's very entertaining.
It'd be good cartoon music, actually.
I wouldn't be surprised if somebody does.
Oh, yeah. I haven't heard the version that you're going to play tonight. I have heard the original version from the Roaring Twenties, and it sounded to me like if Gershwin and Charles Mingus had collaborated with Stravinsky on The Rite of Spring.
On The Rite of Spring, yeah, pretty much.
Which is impossible and crazy and kind of fun.
Yeah, kind of fun, and I mean, not to give it away, but it's kind of jazzy rhythms, most of them fast rhythms, and you hear something that might resemble a Charleston and other stuff, and at the end, when the craziness tends to get out of hand, there's a waltz, and you think, what on earth? Why is that waltz there, and why does that waltz sound so normal? It's very ironic, the piece.
And fun, and a rare opportunity to hear it, so thank you. And I really like the context in which you're presenting it with the Bernstein Serenade and the Copland Third Symphony. Now, Carlos is gesturing at this web of cables and microphones, which means our friends from Sound Mirror are back to record tonight. Now, we'll be broadcasting the concert on All Classical Portland, yay, but also 2 of the pieces tonight, the Antheil and the Copland, will also be on the next CD by the Oregon Symphony, along with the Walter Piston ballet music you played last week, or 2 weeks ago, or whenever that was.
We're putting out a new CD that is all American. And the fun part of it is it's so different because the flute, incredible flutist that is already, as we say, in the can. Fun music circus. The Jazz Symphony is, as we are trying to explain, bits and pieces and very crazy. And the Copland is huge, a huge piece of really great music. But before that, in tonight's concert, we have the wonderful Serenade for violin, strings, harp, and percussion by Leonard Bernstein, which is a piece that Bernstein himself liked very much. I mean, Bernstein himself at that time when he wrote this piece was a very busy man. And he was already well known for having written opera and Broadway musical and all of that. So he was very popular. And nonetheless, he managed to actually write what we call serious music, because this is a piece of serious music. And I think the wonderful thing in Leonard Bernstein's music is, with few exceptions, he can never neglect this touch of rhythm, this sparkle in the eye, this certain ironic approach to music, and for sure not the several American dance rhythms. I think I know one piece by Bernstein, two, that don't use that, and are two of these symphonies, Jeremiah and mainly Kaddish. Kaddish doesn't use this at all. But the serenade is based on Plato's Symposium. And Plato's Symposium, Greek philosophers coming together and speaking about love, and about what love means, and how you can approach love, and love is this, no, love is more the most important thing that happens to you in life. Love is more something philosophical. Love is something like chemistry and physics coming together, stuff like that. Oh, it's like Plato's Symposium. It could happen today, because I'm sure today we can find a couple of philosophers and they would say pretty much what the Greeks said so long ago. And each movement is dedicated to one philosopher, with the exception of the last one. And it starts out like a wonderful love song. It's so soothing. The violin actually starts, the soloist starts alone, and then we all join in. And then, with the fast part of the first movement, we kind of rock already the house. That's where Bernstein is really himself. And same thing in the third movement, which is really incredibly fast paced. It's over in 2 minutes 20, something like that. And so we kind of go into philosophy, all of us, of this and that. And there is something that actually Bernstein always wrote very well, which are slow lyrical movements. And the fourth movement is probably one of the most beautiful movements you can hear in terms of violin and an orchestra. Amazing music. And then comes the last movement, which actually, in terms of talking about love, as far as Bernstein interprets it, is the most serious music. And it comes to life with so much emphasis and such an enormous intensity that you think, oh my God, love will explode. The heart is so full of everything and the intensity is so great. And at that moment, the philosophers get interrupted by a bunch of drunks. And the rest of the piece is a party.
Things haven't changed much since Plato's time. You say Plato, I say Plato. Let's give Gershwin the night off.
Yeah, every time I say a name, I realize that probably I pronounce it wrong. Or I...
Just be lucky, just be thankful you don't have my job. Yeah.
Yeah, you always
How
get
many
called.
names have I mispronounced on the air? Oh dear, it's frightening to think. I had this notion in my head that this serenade by Bernstein was a later piece than it actually is. It was written around the same time I was born. And it's just so good that I just thought of it as mature, all grown up Bernstein, but he was only in his 30s, I guess. He was a good composer, interesting composer.
I mean, he was another one of the composers who had probably his best years as a composer fairly early. I would say that very often you see that. Very rarely you see composers who get to be 70 and 80 and still their output is probably the best that they did. Usually, Richard Strauss is another one. Yes, we fairly recently played in a wonderful concert his 4 last songs. Incredible music. But the pieces for which he is famous, Till Eulenspiegel, Don Juan, Heldenleben, Death and Transfiguration, blah, 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 or operas, Salome, young pieces, fairly young pieces.
Yeah.
So that happened to Bernstein. And Bernstein, God, I mean, he had so many things to do. There was so much talent in this man. And I cannot get tired of repeating that when I grew up, I always thought that Leonard Bernstein is a great conductor who writes a little bit of music on the side. Because what I knew was actually West Side Story. And I thought, yeah, West Side Story is great, but it's Broadway. As if writing well for Broadway would be easy.
Especially that well.
Oh yeah. And later, of course, you learn one thing or two, hopefully, and then you realize, first of all, writing well for Broadway, oh, good luck with that one. And Bernstein did incredibly well with that alone. Second, I started to learn pieces by him and conduct pieces by him, and all of a sudden I was a transformed musician, and now I think this was a great composer who actually happened to be a great conductor. But that's how it, and on top he was an amazing teacher. Still, when we all see what he did for young people and his lectures, it's incredibly the charisma of this man.
He was also very well educated and very broadly and deeply educated. He didn't just come across this symposium thing in the Sunday comics or something. He had actually studied philosophers when he was in college. You want to say anything about our wonderful soloist, James Ennis, the only Canadian violinist I know of who lives in Florida?
I actually asked him.
Yeah, why does he live there?
Without giving too much, he is married to a wonderful young lady who was a ballet dancer in Florida.
Oh.
And you know what happens to soloists is actually very easy. Soloists have such a great thing, it doesn't really matter where they live. They can live anywhere as long as there is a fairly big airport in their vicinity. Because, you know, soloists are not, they probably travel more than even I do, and I travel a lot, but they travel in very small chunks. I travel and I have to stay 1 week or 2 weeks here and there. They come and in 2-3 days they are gone already, and they don't have the honor that I have of being the music director of the Oregon Symphony, so they can live in Florida if they like hurricanes. I happen, aside from everything else they like, I happen to like the rain, kind of.
You're not alone, I gather.
At least we have seasons here.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think if I was married to a ballerina, I'd be willing to live wherever she did. That would be, I could probably do that. Okay, onward, intermission, then the Great American Symphony. At least I think of it that way. The Symphony No. 3 by Aaron Copland. Now, I'm guessing most people here know the fanfare for the Common Man, which is the other side of the coin to Barber's Adagio for strings. In terms of popularity, you know, when something sad happens in America, like a president dies, then, you know, we'll trot out the Adagio for strings. And when something joyful or triumphant happens, we're likely to listen to the fanfare for the Common Man. And Copland includes that fanfare at the beginning of the finale in this 4-movement symphony. And we talked about this on Northwest Previews Thursday night, Carlos, and you talked about how he sets up the fanfare at the end of the slow movement, where he starts hinting at it in this lyrical, soft, beautiful way, and then it explodes, and there it is again, the whole fanfare for the Common Man. And then right after that is another wonderful moment where it stops and you don't know what's going to happen next. That's an edge of your seat kind of moment in this symphony that I just love.
I just have, this is just an interpretation on my side. I do not view, because you said we here in America utilize the adagio when we mourn and the fanfare when we are joyful. I don't see the fanfare as joyful. For me, it does something very different. And that has nothing to do with the fact that, yes, history tells us that it was written, I think, 1942 for Cincinnati Symphony. Cincinnati, we were 1942, World War II. And Cincinnati Symphony had this idea of commissioning 10 composers to write a fanfare, let's say, for the occasion that America was at war. And
name the others, can you?
9 of them are forgotten, of the fanfares. And this one remains as kind of, it's the fanfare. Now, having said that, and even thinking about how this fanfare is being set up in the symphony, it doesn't, in me personally, it doesn't get this feeling of happiness.
For me, it's more triumphant than happy.
Now we are talking, but not triumphant in the sense of, I just won the lottery.
I wouldn't know.
Kind of funny when you hear the fanfare for Kalmar and it's the lottery. But no, in the sense of the United States is an incredibly great country. And we stand at the end of the fanfare. It takes a while. We just stand tall. That's all. In a way, for me, it's very, very poised. I mean, you see me struggle with words because, first of all, how can I express what I really mean? And second, it's English. I already messed up Plato tonight. Plato. So, but you know, this grandeur. For me, the entire symphony, the Copland's third, is a lot of things that I personally love very much about the United States. A lot of those. Meaning, on one side, it's this incredibly vastness of, well, this country is quite big. And if you, I mean, you have done that way more often than I have done, but if you travel in a car through the Midwest, and it's cornfields, or wherever. It doesn't need to be cornfields. It's just, it never ends. It's so enormous. That alone is one. Second, this the joyfulness of dancing, which happens actually in the fourth movement after the fanfare. It's very joyful. The majesty of this grand country, the warmth that is in this piece, in the first movement, and in parts of the third is so incredibly warm. And I relate that to the fact that, especially living here in Portland, people are so incredibly friendly and they are so welcoming. And for me, Copland just managed way better than I can explain it in words to put Americanism into music in 42 minutes, whatever length the piece is. I have no idea how long the piece is, but it's all there. And it's actually, I think that Copland, when he wrote this piece, was kind of aiming at something like that, without thinking of it like that. Because Copland was a composer who could write fairly fast. And at the time, he thought about writing this third symphony. He had not written a symphony for over a decade. He had written other stuff, but nothing so big. And his first two symphonies are not, by a long shot, this large, like this one. And he went about this idea of writing his Symphony Number 3 in a very meticulous way. He was very careful what to write, when and how and where to put it. And the idea, I don't know whether at the start of the composition he already had this idea of putting the fanfare for the common man in the symphony, but even if he had it, it doesn't matter. The way he does it is spectacular. It's just genius, because it would be so easy if you write a grand piece of music and then somewhere in the piece there is a fanfare. Great, so what? But no, he just sets it up, and he kind of does a prelude to this fanfare. It's actually one of the moments that really gives me always the chill. The beginning of this fourth movement, where if you want to see it that way, it's kind of dark, if you want to see it that way. And then there is two flutes and then two clarinets who kind of give you this pa-da-dee very softly, and you're like, oh my. And then everything comes together, and then the entire brass section with celli, double basses, and timpani and big drum start to sing. And it's majesty happening. And the majesty gets so big that then the piece blasts. And it explodes, as you have said. And then there is silence. And what comes next is actually a little bit of a reflection what we just heard. And like, oh, wow, this was great. Let's just elaborate. And the elaborate goes, and it picks up pace, and then we got to dance. It's quite a piece.
And later this year, you will be able to buy a CD with this performance on it. And I would encourage you to do that. I know I will be adding it to my collection. Maybe you should write the liner notes for that one. I like the way you talk about America and its music, the way you have tonight.
Yeah, but I personally think that what I say, you know this. Tomorrow we do this again. It's not that I will change my mind, but I cannot repeat it. I don't, it's not something that I prepare and think, oh, I have to tell you what I really think, and these are the words. It just comes to me. I have a very, on one side, I believe that I have a very specific way of looking at this specific piece as a whole, but on the other side, I struggle with actually expressing. I think you know what I mean, but to really say it well, I would have to think way too long.
All right, you have more important things to do.
And I have to conduct a concert.
I take it back. All right. Thank you for coming tonight. This concert is going to be spectacular. Carlos Kalmar.
Robert McBride.